There's an election process underway in Israel, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a campaign stop this past week in Washington, D.C. Ostensibly, Netanyahu's address to Congress was about Iran and the nuclear issue. However, the speech was seen as electioneering, with the Republicans in control of Congress gifting Netanyahu a platform and some valuable face time. The way the speech was covered by Israeli newspapers typifies the media divide in Israel that is also a big part of this election story. Yediat Ahronot used to be the most widely read newspaper in the country. Its owner, Arnon Moses, was considered a centrist until about the time that Israel Hayom hit the newsstands. It's owned by an American billionaire, Sheldon Adelson, an unabashed supporter of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Israel Hayom is a free paper. You can even have it delivered to your doorstep for free, which is why it's now the most widely read newspaper in Israel. Israel Hayom is so widely circulated, so influential, that the paper became the target of a new piece of legislation that went before the Knesset a few months back. That law, had it passed, would have made it illegal in Israel to distribute a loss-making newspaper for free. The idea being to prevent wealthy people like Sheldon Adelson from wielding too much influence in a democracy. However, the new law never made it through the Knesset because before it was passed, Netanyahu called the election. The so-called Israel Hayom law was put on hold, and Israelis are now 10 days away from a vote that will determine the future of their leadership and the shape of their news media. Our starting point this week is Tel Aviv.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of Israel.
When Benjamin Netanyahu went to Washington, he was among friends. He and the Republicans who control Congress share an ideology, an approach to the Middle East, as well as a benefactor. In the 2012 American election, casino-owning billionaire Sheldon Adelson spent at least $100 million trying to get Mitt Romney and as many Republicans elected as possible. If Adelson could do the same in Israel, he probably would. But he can't, so he is making his money and influence felt in other ways.
Israel has very, very strict campaign laws. The amount of money that anybody can donate to a politician is so severely limited that it's insignificant to donate money. So establishing a newspaper, you better believe that that has a significant impact on how people think about current events. Absolutely.
You can find some patron with a lot of money and create for yourself your own little, historical pravda of the old Soviet Union, where one opinion is voiced. It's sort of a propaganda tool in disguise, only the disguise is not a very sophisticated one.
Sheldon Adelson is a Jewish American whose wife is a citizen of Israel. He launched Israel Hayom, which means Israel Today, in 2007. Within 3 years, it was the most widely circulated newspaper in the country, displacing Yediat Ahronot. The difference between the two papers and their respective owners, Adelson and Arnon Moses, has been laid bare in their coverage of this campaign.
The rivalry between the owners, to a large degree, is what defines the content of these papers. Obviously, this has nothing to do with journalism. This is a rivalry that is on one hand commercial and on the other political. It has to do with the personalities and ideologies of the owners of these publications, which then influences the content.
So whereas you'd see in Yediot Ahronot, the front page was just basically top to bottom about Sarah Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu's wife, who has a very long record of erratic behavior, and all these different major analysts weighing in as to why it was important and significant.
Whereas if you take a look at the front page of Israel Hayom in the exact same period of time last week, it is all directed at the speech at Congress. One headline, for example, said, "I am traveling to alert the United States about the dangers of the deal with Iran." You can see Benjamin Netanyahu standing and praying at the Wailing Wall. And the narrative here is a very clear one, of course. It is religious, even, I would say, messianic narrative that they're trying to paint.
What has come to be known as the Israel Hayom law passed first reading in the Knesset in November. Backed by members of 5 different parties, including some in Netanyahu's own coalition, the law would have banned Israel Hayom or any mass circulation free newspaper from getting to market. The law sees such papers as threats to Israel's democracy. And there has been plenty of speculation that the Prime Minister made the decision to go to the polls early because of the Israel Hayom factor. Had Netanyahu waited and called the election a year from now, Adelson's free paper might not have been around to back him.
I think that Netanyahu was very disappointed, obviously, to see his coalition partners supporting that law in some cases. And I think that that certainly encouraged him, among a bunch of other issues, to see that the coalition wasn't working, and there was a good reason to have a kind of snap election.
Nobody has produced a smoking gun to prove this. There were other reasons that Netanyahu gave for dissolving the coalition. It seems we will never truly know what happened. But even if it is not the main reason, it certainly was a factor. And there is a dependence between Netanyahu and Adelson that is very concerning. And because of all the positive coverage that Adelson has given Netanyahu over the years, he owes him a favor and now needs to dance to his tune.
Yisrael Hayom is not the first free newspaper to be introduced into the Israeli media scene. It's just the biggest one. But that's a pretty slippery slope. To pass a draconian law that forbids anyone to distribute a newspaper for free. So what if some pro-peace group has no funding, starts a sort of an ad hoc newspaper and wants to just stand on the corners distributing it and saying, we want peace with the Palestinians now, we demand negotiations today. And then the police stops them and said, you're under arrest for distributing a newspaper for free. I mean, clearly it goes both ways, and I just think it's a really supremely bad idea.
This was a first reading of a bill which was intended and tailored specifically to go after a free newspaper that was a mass circulation newspaper. The bill's not a broad general law that says, okay, we're going to get rid of free newspapers. But I think it also relates to Israeli history. If you look back to the 1950s, many Knesset legislators wanted to get rid of Ha'alam Hazeh, which was Yuri Avneri's leftist newspaper. And in the 60s and 70s, many times Israel tried to shut down Al-Ittihad, which was a communist newspaper. So I think that what we see in Israel is kind of just this heavy-handed approach sometimes, which is that the politicians think, if we don't like something, let's ban it.
Israelis are fortunate in that they live in a wired society and have as many options for news online as there are issues in this election. In the news business, you get what you pay for. In the case of Israel Hayom, readers are getting what Sheldon Adelson pays for, a free newspaper that many in Israel think the country and the democracy can no longer afford.
We're lucky to have some more open venues, such as the internet. There's no editor and there's no newspaper owner, but newspapers are here to stay. It's a very significant moment in the history and future of Israeli media. And I think partly it's going to have to do with the results of this upcoming election.
On the download this week, our viewers weigh in on the coverage of the election story in Israel.
I don't see the paper battle having such a big impact on this election, mostly because people look at the media as a little bit of a supermarket. If you're to the left, you're going to be reading papers that are more to the left. If you're to the right, you're going to look at papers that are more to the right. Israelis are getting their information about the election from plenty of places. It's not just the newspapers, it's also radio, it's also television. Of course, the internet is a major play.
If you want to get a holistic picture of what's happening politically or in every other aspect, you need to read at least two newspapers, or you need to watch at least 2 different news broadcasts on TV, or you can just simply go to the sites like 972, which is in English, that they give a broader and much more comprehensive perspective.